Patrick Mcandrew, welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Sheida. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Yes, it's such a great honor to have you. I had the pleasure of meeting you at Neighborhood Playhouse. We went to the same program together. And I noticed something about you ever since, because we stayed friends, obviously, but you are always creating something. I mean, you are writing, producing, directing, acting, and all this fun stuff that you do that I follow up actually on your social media. And I had the privilege of being in a couple of projects as well. Tell me how you find time to do all this stuff and yet have your personal life taken care of. How do you find time to do everything?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sheida. I think that part of it is doing the things that sometimes you don't really feel like doing, but you know that it's going to be a positive on the other side. So it's a matter of making time for the things that, at least for me, are important. So, thinking about some of the projects, like the ones that we had worked on together, I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. In both cases, stories that I wanted to tell. And so even though there were aspects of it where I thought, and especially because we were working with a small team as well, there were things that I had to do that maybe I didn't want to do, but I was like, okay, I'm going to carve out the time for this because it's an investment for the finished product, essentially. And then being able to say, hey, I have this project that now I'm able to share with people. And a big reason why I started to create my own projects was just because as an actor, it's very difficult relying on someone else to be like, hey, here, you could be in this show, or you could be in this play, or whatever it may be. I don't think it's any secret to yourself or to your listeners that acting is a very difficult profession in a lot of ways. Not only in the craft itself, but also just the business side of things. And so having the opportunity to create my own work allows me to continue to build on my craft, to learn new skill sets as well, to discover, okay, what areas do I want to explore more, which ones maybe not so much. And so I also go at it with this understanding that no matter what I'm doing in this process, it's going to make me a stronger artist on the other side.
That's right. Let's go back in time. Let me ask you this. If you had a time machine, I went all the way back in your life and we found Patrick, 5-year-old, 6-year-old. If we find you just on your own, playing in your room, what would you be spending a lot of time on without wanting to be distracted or without even caring how time would pass by? What would that be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny because it's not something I really thought about at the time, obviously. But as I've gotten older, I have thought about it more like, oh, what was I spending my time doing when I was younger? A lot of it was character building in an interesting way, just through imagination, whether it was characters that I was playing or pretending to be, or characters that I was projecting on like the toys or action figures that I played with. And so I think that's something, if to answer that question, if you were to go back, especially when I was younger, what I'd be doing, it would be that. I'd spend hours and hours playing with my siblings. And I thought about that recently, just how a lot of times that's such a privilege to be able to play and lose track of time. And I think we get those moments as adults and they're such special moments, but we don't have them as often. So I think specifically in the work that we do, discovering opportunities to find those moments where we lose track of time, I think it's important to clock those. It's funny you bring that up because I've thought about that. Is like, okay, when I was younger, what would I enjoy doing so much that I wouldn't even be thinking about the time.
That's very interesting. In the recent interview that I did in the Canvas Rebel magazine, I touched base on that specifically because I do believe that we all are born with something very specific as talent, as tool that we bring, that we show off very early in life as kids, that later on in life, if we are lucky enough to pursue that, we see how empowering those tools are to each individual. And like you mentioned, you will never notice the time passing by, and at the end of the day you will be even more energized than fatigued or exhausted because of doing something that you don't like to do. I myself, when I was a kid, you would find me singing and dancing and performing and creating stories in my corner. When I was doing things, I was just mimicking all the songs that I've seen, for example, in a movie or something.
I think that's there's something that's really special in that so many of us as adults, we lose that ability to play. And play is so central. You look at other mammals, dogs, cats, for example, even when they are past what's considered childhood, they still love playing. But there's so many adults out there that lose that. Yeah. And so I think that as artists, that's something that we recognize, that this is something that needs to be nourished. And I think my hope is that all adults figure that out at some point in their lives. But I think that some discover it later than others.
Did you discover it early?
I always had a sense of play, 100%. I think that's something that I recognized the importance of cultivating throughout my whole life thus far. If you're talking specifically acting, that's something that I had a drive to do in high school, but didn't get involved with at all until I was actually in college. And so at its basic level, I really see acting at its most foundational level as playing. You know, it's why it's called a play. And so I think I've always had that central to who I am.
I know you have a master's in performing arts. So that was your initial goal, to go directly. It was not something that happened to you at some point in life that made you, you know what, instead of doing this, I'm going to pursue acting because I always wanted to do acting. So my question is this planned, or this is something that you realized later in life that you want to pursue?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's something that I definitely discovered later, because when I was in high school, I had this drive to do it, but I was involved in so many different things. I was in marching band. I was a drummer, still am a drummer. That's also, you know, a whole other aspect. But once I went into college, my first semester, freshman year, I was like, I'm gonna try out for the play, try something new. And I auditioned. I had no idea what I was doing, but I ended up getting cast in the play that we were doing. I didn't have any lines or anything. I was essentially a glorified set mover. I helped move the sets, but I was in costume and I was technically an ensemble member. And I remember being backstage before the play opened and just feeling this energy. Oh my gosh, this is so cool. This is so exciting. And so I got more and more involved in the theater program at my school, took a bunch of acting classes, as well as classes related to theater, history of theater, acting styles, a design course as well, and was just like fully immersed into it. I graduated, and then I was like, I need a job.
Of course, we all do.
You know, I have student loans and I have to figure things out. Thankfully, I had a period of time where I traveled a bit after I graduated, but then when I got back, reality hit me and I was like, okay, I need a job. So I got a job outside of the entertainment industry. I was working in college admissions. After a little bit of time doing it, I think it was about a year, I just felt this like gaping hole because I wasn't doing anything with theater. I wasn't doing anything with acting. And I had this drive to be involved again. I knew that it was something that I had to be doing. And so that was kind of the impetus for going to graduate school, where I got a master's in theater. And it was in graduate school that I really started to hone in my artistic style, what I wanted to say as an artist. and also what area of theater I was most interested in. Because it was a master's of theater, I did take a lot of performance-based classes, but it wasn't just performance-based classes. I took a playwriting class. There were a lot of classes that were kind of on critical theory and kind of the more scholarship side of theater. And so I had this opportunity to really explore myself as an artist and what I wanted to focus on. And it was during grad school that I really started to begin to lean more towards the acting and performance side of things. That, okay, that's what I want to be my focus, despite having these experiences elsewhere. I had an assistantship while I was there. I highly, any listeners who are looking in grad school, check out the Master of Arts in Theater program at Villanova University, because they offer a bunch of assistantships and scholarships. So being able to get paid to go to school like that is such an incredible privilege. And while I was there, I would build all the sets for our shows. I would do all the lighting. So it gave me some great skill sets. So then when I moved to New York City after I graduated, those were the first jobs I was doing. I was, building sets off Broadway, doing the lighting, and it just kind of gave me this nice, well-rounded perspective on what goes into putting up a production. And of course, doing that, I had started to audition and everything while doing so. So it was certainly a long process of figuring it out. You hear so many actors who say, oh yeah, when I was 3 years old, I knew that I wanted to be an actor. That definitely was not the case with me. It was certainly a journey, but I'm really lucky that, and as I look back, I'm so thankful that I had the journey that I've had thus far.
Now it all makes sense how you can do all these things all at the same time.
I mean, I'm still figuring it out. Absolutely. I mean, I come from a theater background. Of course, we've started many projects that you and I have worked on have been film projects. And so a lot of things within the film realm, I've been figuring it out, and kind of, it's one of those things where you have to do it in order to learn how to do it in so many ways.
Actually, I love that a lot. That is one of my mantras. Just, why? Because Rumi says, walk on the path and the path will appear. So I do believe that I throw myself, I jump, and then hopefully I will land, somewhere that I won't get hurt. And then at the same time, you will learn and you will grow and get your experience. So I noticed that you do that a lot too, because you're always creating. And then as you go, you will find your path and you will find the people will appear in your life to, help and all that. I want to ask you about the musical that you wrote, The Startup. That is so fascinating. And I cannot wait to see it. You're in the production.
Yeah, it's currently in development. Yeah.
Yes. So how did the idea of the musical come to mind? What was the process? How did that even start? And if you can just
it's a great question. It has been a passion project of mine for some time now. When I was finishing up grad school, I read this amazing book called Reclaiming Conversation, The Power of Talk in a Digital Age by a woman named Sherry Turkle. She's a professor at MIT. And the book is all about how, as technology is continuing to advance, she calls it an assault on empathy, and how really our reliance and dependence on technology is taking us away from really deeply understanding one another. And that really resonated with me a lot, because as I looked around my surroundings, there'd be times where I'd be in a conversation with someone, they take out their phone, and you could tell that they're not really listening. And so when I was at the tail end of my grad school, I actually created a one-man show called Real, which explored this a lot. It explored technology's impact on human relationships. And when I moved to New York, I performed it here in New York. So it's a subject that is very fascinating for me. And I think specifically exploring it as like an actor and writer through theater and film, I think is a really effective, almost like research lab to explore this, because when it comes to acting and when it comes to storytelling, it's such a viscerally human experience. And that is in juxtaposition in a lot of ways to how technology has kind of embedded its power into our lives. It's brought us many good things. Of course, we're doing this podcast because of technology, but it doesn't come without its negatives as well. So I became really immersed in sort of this tech wellness, digital wellness, responsible tech space. There's a variety of different organizations that I have volunteered with. I had a blog for a while where I was writing about these topics. And in all honesty, I kind of diverted a bit. So I had, okay, this is my acting and creative work, and then this is my tech work. And I started to think about, okay, there's all these amazing coaches and other professionals working in this tech wellness space. What could I bring differently to the table? Well, it's my background as an artist, my background as an actor and writer. And I wanted to think about a way that I could reach a larger audience to spread awareness about these topics. And so I had done the one-man show that went really well, but I wanted to make a bigger splash. And so I thought, okay, well, what if I create a musical that's about these topics? And so it was that prior experience that inspired the story. It follows our main protagonist is this young man named Chip Cooper, who is this founder of a new social media company called Kazoo. And it's this social media app that uses artificial intelligence for people to imprint certain designs and fashion on themselves for all their friends to see. And the show explores a lot of themes around social media, influencer culture, data privacy as well. And so I built out the script, I wrote all the songs, and as I was beginning to write the music to go with the lyrics that I had created, I was like, okay, I'm going to need some help with this because I'm not much of a, so while I am an actor, I'm not really a musical theater performer. I've done a couple musicals, but not much. And while I'm a musician, I'm by no means a trained composer or anything like that. So I went into my Rolodex, tried to think through, okay, who could potentially help me with this? And there was someone named Kevin Mcandrew who I had known through a contact at graduate school. And so I contacted him. I was like, hey, I've written this musical. I need someone to collaborate with on the music, to write the music with. And he was like on board. He's like, all right, that sounds great. And we actually worked on the music together all throughout COVID, when COVID first started. So I started writing the musical in early 2019, pretty much spent a year working on it. Kevin came in 2020. We spent all that time doing the music through there. And then we had our first staged reading in 2021. We had another reading in 2022. And now it's in development. We're working towards a workshop production of it. We've recorded some demos for some of the songs. We've been talking with organizations and producers that may be able to help us mount the workshop production. So if all goes well, it will happen sometime in 2025, pending on the funding, if we're able to get the funding to put it up. But it really has been a fun and exciting project to work on. And I think after that first reading, I had been working on this show for about 2.5 years, and I received some great feedback from the producers who came to the reading. The show has changed a lot too since that first reading, but I think what I learned was, okay, this is going to be a long game. This is going to take a long time. I'm not just going to have a reading of the musical and then it's going to be on, the biggest stages out there. This is going to be a process. And so I've really learned how to enjoy the process, even though it has its ups and downs throughout.
For sure. Always. Will you be in it?
I'm not in it. No. So that's a really good question. When I first wrote the show, I was intending to have myself in it. But then the more I worked on it, I decided I don't think that this musical one needs me. I think that, and I should preface this in saying that I'm not really much of a singer. So it was kind of a combination of that. And then also thinking about, okay, I need to focus on the writing of the book, the lyrics, and the music. I'm going to focus on that, and I'm not going to actually be in it. So it's something that when I first started writing it, I certainly thought about a lot. But now I'm actually glad that I'm not in it, because I'm able to focus much more deeply on the writing side of things. And that's why eventually I hope to get a producer on board to help us out as well, because I've been having to carry the load with that thus far, and that's a whole other skill set and task that one has to do, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I am very excited. I have listened to a couple of songs, and I cannot wait to see the show when it's out.
Ah, there we go.
Yes.
Yes.